Hello. Today we're going to talk about standards, and standards are not only for ourselves, but also for how we're engaging in our lives and what we're willing to put up with. Similar to boundaries, but a little bit different. I know a lot of us struggle with boundaries, but standards are kind of what we hold ourselves to. And I think that especially towards the end of the year, which is where we are now, but no, it doesn't matter when you're listening to this. Oftentimes we feel like we're not meeting our own standards. And Stacy and I are going to have a conversation today, hopefully to help you, because all of us have different issues or themes or contexts in our lives where we feel like we're either not up to standards or we're above standards or somebody else isn't up to our standards. So Stacy, we were just talking about this before we started recording, and you are always really good with strategic questions. What would be some questions we can ask ourselves when oftentimes we don't even realize that the thing we need to look at are our standards?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the word standard can be generalized sometimes into like what you expect, right? Like, what does that mean to each person? Someone might, when they think of their standards, they might not think of what they expect from themselves or other people or what, so to me, like my standard is like if I say to my, so let's use this weekend for me as an example. I had a pool tournament on Saturday. I was very tired. I did not feel well. I even had a couple of drinks the night before, so when I woke up with a headache, not a lot, but just didn't feel great. And I was prepping for this tournament all week. And of course, the morning comes and I'm like, oh, I just don't feel great. I'm really tired. The dogs were barking really late, right? But for me, my standard is that I will give 100% at any tournament or any competition. Whether I win or lose doesn't matter, but my standard is that, like, for me, right, I want to bring all of what I got to the tournament. So I did, right? Like, and it's much harder, obviously, when things aren't up to par, to deliver the standard you have for yourself. And then sometimes you have to learn from it and say, my standard would have been to wake up feeling refreshed with a good breakfast and ready to go, but that just kind of didn't happen, right? So then I have to say, okay, like, what am I going to hold myself to today? What is how I want to see myself? And asking yourself these type of questions when things get difficult is what will help you determine what your standards are. And I think in relationships and in sports and competition and work, it's the same, right? Like, so I have a lot of conversations with friends and they say, this is going on or that's going on in my relationship. And I say, okay, but like you set your standards, right? Like, so people know what your tilt point is, right? Like what you're going to deal with and what you're not.
I don't think I have to disagree with you. I think a lot of us don't think about it often enough. This is where I think like taking time to understand why you're not feeling how you want to feel, because oftentimes frustration is an indicator, right? It's a signal to us that standards, expectations aren't being met. And I think that we don't even realize why we're frustrated. And that's where you have to take some time to look at, as I heard you talk, I thought about we don't always wake up with the same capacity. It doesn't
Right.
always have to do with not feeling well or, staying up late or partying. Sometimes it's just emotionally. We go through shifts throughout the year, men and women do, where sometimes our capacity to handle different situations is not the same that it was the month before, or our energy levels, right? Our energy levels also fluctuate throughout the day, throughout the month, throughout the years. Like my brother got married this weekend, and my standards for a party is like, let's have fun, right? But it was 9 o'clock, and I was like, I need to go to bed. So my
Yeah.
capacity and my energy were not in the same place that like 25, 26 year olds were at the party. And we both had the same standards, right? We wanted to have fun, celebrate my brother, but our capacity and our energy weren't there. And that's where I think this practice of embracing yourself wherever you are, even if it's not where you expect to be, even if it's not at your standard, is so
Right.
important. And I also thought about this at my brother's wedding, and that's that I'm way older than my brother. and I've been married way longer. My brother just got married. And as I'm listening to them say their vows, you hear all of these like ideological and like it's going to be beautiful and just kind of these magical, innocent moments, right? Of people that haven't been married. My husband and I are sitting there staring at each other because he's also a best man. So we're both standing at the front and we're both kind of chuckling and giggling. And it was such a cool moment because we were both thinking like, boy, they have no idea, right? Like their standards of what they expect of living with someone in marriage. It's beautiful right at the beginning, but once you get into it, you realize, okay, yeah, we're not always going to wake up and look rosy and be in a good mood and be ready to go, but that's
Mhm.
life, right? And I think that we have to allow ourselves to shift. Our standards don't have to change, right?
Right. But
Have
you
to allow ourselves to shift according to where we are with each situation.
I think so, but I think like the way, and I agree in this sense that like for me, right, obviously I had to allow for whatever was going on with me, regardless of my standards, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to play. But I also have to think to myself, you create your standards based on what you want for your life, right? Like you say, I don't know, like I want to be skinnier, I want to be healthy, right? Like, I personally struggle with weight loss, and no matter what I do, if I like look at some bread, I'm going to gain a couple of pounds, and I really like bread. But it also makes me feel sick and tired, and I get all kinds of other things like that going on. And it's like for me, my standard obviously is to be fit and healthy. As you get older, that's much harder. I, oh, Beautiful doggies. Just barking. That's my big 70-pound puppy.
Mhm.
You could always just pause it. Can you pause it a minute?
Yeah, but then we'll have to start a whole other recording.
I'll go back to where I was.
So we're back.
So we are back without distractions. So what I was saying about setting your own standards is that, like you said, I think the indicator is when you don't feel well or when you feel emotional or stressed or whatever, instead of just kind of, it's great to, I think, deal with it and accept it, and all of that is great. But then asking yourself strategic questions is really important, right? Like at this point, when I feel this way, how do I work towards my standards, or how do I work towards happiness, or whatever it is that you want? Because when you ask yourself those questions, your brain is going to want to help you. Your brain is going to want to give you those answers, and you're going to look outside of yourself for those things. And so I think there's two parts to that, right? Like the first part is acceptance, because no matter what, we're all going to be on this crazy roller coaster, up and down, feeling great, feeling crappy, feeling emotional. Relationships with other people are hard because it's hard to even know yourself. And so all of these things are indicators for you to say to yourself, what kind of standards am I setting for myself? And what do I need to do to reach those standards from where I am? Because then you have a pathway out.
I think it's hard to even know how to accept yourself. Like I think I've been trained in this. I've studied this. And I laughed today because I was on this show and they sent me a little clip of it's gonna air tomorrow. And it's a clip of me going, think about how you want to feel and then keep moving towards it and then think about it again and then think about it again when you're frustrated or having a bad day or whatever. And I laughed as soon as I heard myself. And my son's like, why are you laughing? And I'm like, because it's hard to follow my own advice. So I think it's so hard to remember when standards aren't being met, when expectations are just, your expectations lead you to disappointment, which by the way, anytime you have an expectation, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. That's just a rule of life. But
You need to know, yeah, that disappointment could be coming.
yeah, but it's like, I mean, you're a professional athlete, right? Like, how do you accept that you sucked? I'm not saying you suck, but all of us suck, right? All of us suck at the thing we're good at. How do you come to a place of going, okay, I'm just not having a good day and I'm going to be okay with it? I think that's where people struggle with acceptance. Acceptance is easy when things are going right. Acceptance is easy when it's not your problem. It might be a problem around you, but it's not yours. But when it's yours and that heaviness in your heart is there and that numbness inside of you is there,
I
how
have
do
had
we
that.
accept and how do
So
we shift our
I've
standards?
had that so many times, right? So many times, like throughout my life. I mean, I've lost people I loved, my best friend. I've had two best friends die. One died in a car accident. The one that gave me my pool cue died. I've had loss after loss after loss in pool before I won the nationals. Just a million things, right? And I guess when I think farther enough back, for me, right, it was there's a point where you have so much pain and so much stress that you say to yourself, something has to be better, right? Like, where can I go from here? Because I don't want to be here anymore. It's too much to be here. Some people get it's like a tornado, right? You get caught in this feelings and emotions and stress, and then you create this cycle of destruction in your life based on whatever's going on. And then there's some people that reach their hand out and they're like, I need something else. Give me the answers, even if you don't know what they are. But when you ask yourself those questions, your brain starts to look, right? Your brain starts to say, where are they? Where are the answers? And then you like the reticular activating system in your brain, which we could talk about later, wants you to be right. And you start seeing those things, right? Maybe you'll see self-help boards. I don't know, whatever you see, books. But like for me, it
You
was
know that, yeah, this just reminded me of two things that are like scientifically proven. And there's this effect, I forget what it's called, but it's like when somebody buys a red car, all of a sudden they start to notice all the other red cars in the road and they notice that there's a whole bunch of red cars in the road because
yeah, I
emotions
think that's
shift.
part of the reticular activating
Yeah,
system.
yeah, and we start to notice. And the other thing is that studies have shown they did these studies on professional athletes and they studied behavior, just body language, and teams that win. And what they learned from teams that win is that they weren't looking at the game, they weren't looking at plays, they weren't looking at ability. All they were looking at is how the players were relating to one another. And they found that the more high fives that teams gave one another, the more that likely they were to win, right? Which just shows you like we're going to the standard of we're awesome, we're rocking it, we're supporting each other, we're doing teamwork. And I think it's just about where your attention, well, I don't think, I know it's about where your attention is. But again, it's so easy to get stuck in that refusal to just go, okay, this is where I am. This is where I am. I don't like it. Doesn't mean my standards, not where I want to be, but it is where I am. And I need to high five myself and go, okay, we're here. And how do we move forward?
It's a small thing, right? So some people I have conversations like this with, and they're like, I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. There's no hope or whatever, right? So it's like, okay, you can't start with like being the most positive person if you're stressed out and everything is crashing down. Start with something really small. Like if I'm stressed out and I look at my beautiful dogs or anything that I love, like I'm sure lots of people have kids, like whatever it is that you love, you look at these things that you love and you say, there is something out there that's better, and you want better for the people that you love. And if you want better for them, the only way to show them is by doing it for yourself. And,
Hmm.
and you have to say, like, to yourself, if you have hope, right? So people sometimes they just don't believe, right, that the things can get better. Um, and they can, right? Like they can get better. And like I just got invited to, and I didn't get to tell you this, it's a conference for animals with cancer. And one of the PhDs that I spoke with about Yara, my dog, she sent me an email and invited me to this conference. So I'm really excited about like hearing all of the new trials and research. And these are all like veterinarians and doctors and stuff. But I'm like so excited about it because I want to go and talk to them about like my research and like all of the things that I do, right? And I just think like like what you want. I wasn't looking to like do it. It's just that
No,
what
but your focus and your standards were I'm going to save my dog. That would those were your standards. Like
but
I'm going to
I
let my
am
dog.
being, but I can't say I'm gonna save her because I say information is available to everyone. You
Well,
use
you said I'm going to enhance my dog's quality of life. That's what
you're
I meant.
gonna use
I'm
the
going to enhance your
information that
dog's quality of life, and you
yeah.
did. You did.
And this information is available to anybody who wants to better their life, but they have to believe that it can happen. I mean, look at your story, right? Paralyzed, wasn't going to be able to walk again, but like it's like when you think back and you say, if you were caught in the tornado of where you were with no hope, with no determination to ask yourself the right questions, you wouldn't be here. where you
You
are
know,
now.
I was thinking about that recently. We were thinking about that as my husband and I were talking about, all the things we've been through when we were talking about my brother, the innocence of when you first start
Mhm.
a relationship, like a long-term relationship, all the hard things we've been through. And I didn't even bring that up. Like it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Like literally
Yeah.
that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life is
Yeah.
learn to walk again and go through all that. But that didn't even come to the forefront of my brain. You know why? Because when I was in that situation, there was no room in
Right.
my mind space for I'm not going to be mobile and walk. I never allowed, and I don't know why. I don't know why, because I see other people go through it and I know how terrifying it is to be in that situation. But for whatever reason, my survival mode and my nervous system was like, nope, not even considering any other options. And my standard was, I'm going to walk and I'm going to do it fast, and I did. I did it faster than most people. And
You had the hope. You had the hope. You were in a
yes,
situation that was so dire and you felt so bad that that drove you
yes.
that drove what you wanted, right? And so when people are in this situation and they don't realize, look at something that you love, look at something that you want, look at something that you appreciate, whatever it is, once you create it for yourself in your mind, then you can do it. Then you start asking yourself, how do I get here? Like when I wanted to win the nationals and I couldn't play pool, and I said, like this was like a million years ago, but like I said, I'm going to be a professional pool player. And they're like, you're like a beginner, you can't hold a pool stick. And I said, I don't know, like this is my standard. This is what I want, right? Like, what do I need to do to get there? And it was a lot, right? Because I need to change my mind. I need to change my motivations. I needed, and at the end, I realized that like it wasn't really about that, right? The standard was like, what is my full potential? So sometimes the standard you think you set for yourself, you realize that it was a different standard that was better than what you thought.
Mhm. I
Is-
don't I don't think any of us actually even allow ourselves to go to what our potential is. I don't think I've never few people. I think few people like shoot for the stars because I think most of us are so scared of failure that we hold ourselves back.
I have a good thing, and this is actually good to lead into our next conversation when we do it next week. But I kind of have a good ending to that thing too, because in pool, right, when I teach, I know I use a lot of pool examples, but it could be a life example. I'm going to use more examples that are something else. But right now, I tell people when they're afraid to like make shots or they get up and people are watching their match, and I says, look, if you go out there and you don't give 100% because you're afraid or whatever the situation is, right? Then you're going to lose anyways, right?
Mhm.
Because you're not your full potential. So I tell people, if you're going to lose anyways, you might as well give it 100%
Yeah,
because what's
exactly.
the difference, right? Because sometimes they're in such a bad situation where like we get 10 seconds and the guy's like stuck and they call a timeout and I'm like, they like got no shot, right? So I'm like, look, you're going to lose this game anyways. So if you happen to make this shot, it's a miracle. But if you don't, shoot it like lights out, right? Like shoot it like 100%. And a lot of times they'll make like crazy three reel banks. I'll have like a beginner like doing these crazy long table shots because they got nothing to lose, right? Like you, just like in when you weren't going to walk, right? I mean, that's pretty bad, right? It's like, what's the worst that can happen? You're going to be where you are. So you got nothing to lose, right? Like
Yeah,
except for where you are. And that was just not acceptable. And so
right.
you have to find that place that says, what's the worst that can happen, right? Like, and if that's the worst case scenario, are you really afraid of the worst case scenario? And is it worth it to not risk it all? And
I
I,
think that's how humans have evolved is by risking and putting themselves out there and going. I think back to those guys that thought that we could fly. They didn't even think about airplanes, right? They started out putting on those
yeah,
wings. And I'm like, can you imagine how crazy it is to just be on the earth, on the ground, and go, I'm going to put on some wings and I'm going to fly? Like, if that's not a crazy thought, this is before airplanes, right? Like before modern technology.
yeah, yeah.
But think about if those guys had that idea and understood that we had the capacity to do that, and now we're traveling, on airplanes and getting places super fast. Like that's just a
Yeah.
small example of the capacity that we as humans have for our own innovation, but also for our potential. And I think we're stuck in our fears so often and not accepting ourselves for where we're at and not freeing ourselves from this always trying to be comfortable. Like you said, if I'm going to lose, why not try?
Right. And fear is good, right? Because I don't think any of us are going to escape life without a lot of fear, right? And whether you see it or not, or acknowledge it or not, doesn't matter, right? You're going to have it. And so you can take that fear and use it for something. And you can say, okay, like, I'm afraid of so many things. But I do it anyways, right? It's like, well, I really don't, this could happen, that could happen. I don't know, but I don't entertain those thoughts like you, right? I say, okay, that's okay that I'm afraid because that's going to give me courage to do what I need to do, to get up there and do whatever it is, whether it's talk or do whatever. Like, and these days, like a lot of the fears that I had in my 20s aren't there anymore. And maybe it's because I faced them head on for so long that they just kind of dissipated.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think but I love your analogy of that pull shot because we always feel watched, even when no one cares what we're doing. We always feel like, what are people going to say? Are we going to be judged? Am I not going to be good enough? It's always about, am I enough? And am I going to be okay if I don't fit into this standard or the right way or how things are supposed to be done?
Yeah, I mean, that's important. I think that our next talk, we should definitely talk about the influence of how this society in these days, right? All of these things are very influential to our thoughts. And I mean, when I was growing up, like I said, there was no Facebook, there was none of that stuff. I don't
So
think,
so we'll do that. We'll say that our next conversation for people to tune in will be on and here's my question too. This is what you and I have to think about and then discuss. Like, are we even creating on our own thoughts anymore? Because I don't think some people are.
yes, this is a really good question. And I had a conversation with Brian about this the other day. So I'm really excited to share it with people.
Yeah, so let's stay tuned for that.